Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here. It is the end of the NBA regular season. We have done our regular season review, but now it's time to get into some of the, well, you can call it nitty gritty, but time to get into some of the awards and better performing players of the 24-25 NBA season. Now, while I will be going over the usual stuff with my MVP count and my top 10, I'll also be going through other award winners there. So I've got Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Most Improved, Sixth Man of the Year, and Defensive Player of the Year. I don't do Clutch Player of the Year. There are so many things to determine Clutch Player of the Year for me that I think it's just essentially an award to try and justify giving someone else an individual award. Honestly, I don't think it's a thing of genuine recognition. There's a lot of players who in the past have been recognised as one of the most clutch players in the league in an important situation. There are other players who simply get it because they like to hit a big shot at the end of the game. A lot of other factors that go into the end of a game performing in the clutch. So we won't have that coverage there. But without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into the coverage of my award show. And we'll have a look and start, obviously, with the MVP countdown. Now, we'll start that where we normally do, and that is the usual qualifications for the award. So we start at the usual spot here. So obviously the NBA has their 65-game pace. That's what we need them to play at. You need a player to have played 65 games for them to be eligible for the award. Now, on top of that, as we know, they also need to be leading their team to wins. Now, if you're leading your team to wins and you're playing at that 65-game pace, generally they're going to not be talked about in trade rumours or be traded. There were a couple of rare circumstances this year. But on top of that, it's going to be playoff hopes that determine it as well. Had this all year, had this for the last couple of seasons. Anyone who's followed my stuff will know that. Will understand it and certainly be able to get why I make that decision. So, now that we've gone through the qualifications, it is time to get into our honourable mention of the list and also get into our top 10 of the MVP race for 24-25. The honourable mention, the only honourable mention of the MVP list, is Anthony Davis of the Dallas Mavericks. Now, AD was in the list for quite some time, a top 5 candidate for quite some time. Of course, injury and trade causing him to be discontinued, in my opinion, from that MVP conversation. Now, games missed obviously is a big one, but the trade for me is another factor. Now, it wasn't trade talks, but the value that you see in a player when you trade them clearly is a little different to the value you see in someone who stays, starts, and completes a season. Davis, throughout the year, of course, played for the Mavericks and played for the Lakers, and he had a pretty productive season. So when you look at what he did, 24.7 points, 11.6 rebounds, 3.5 assists, to go 1.2 steals and 2.2 blocks on 2.2 turnovers, shot 51.6% from the field, 28.2 from deep and 77.5% from the free throw line. Again, only playing in the 51 games, need that minimum 65. Played 33.7 minutes in that time, a 30-21 record, and I had him responsible for 21 of those wins that his team participated in. Again, the points there, he isn't eligible due to not playing 65 games and being traded, so that is one key factor. You know, a few other points, though, to really prop up what Anthony Davis was able to do this year. When he was healthy, he was one of the best players in the NBA, you know, and he proved it once again, whether it's playing on the offensive end effectively, whether it's playing well on the defensive end, a perennial or defensive candidate, whether it be from an individual standpoint or whether it be from a team standpoint. You know, the DPOY is certainly a discussion around AD. and of course the all-defensive team selection that goes with that. He's arguably the best player for the Lakers this year as well. He was clearly their best player before the trade, but if you want to go and look at contributions to victories this year, you can still make a case that while he's not with the team, Anthony Davis was the best player for the Los Angeles Lakers this year, and that's a team that ended up third in the playoffs, so they wouldn't have been able to do that without Anthony Davis's contributions. He was a leading DPOY candidate as well as the MVP candidate prior to injury and trade. Continues to show his value on both ends of the floor and what he's able to produce. And of course, finally, in the games that he missed, eligible games missed, his teams went 11 and 18 without him. So as an honourable mention in my MVP race for 24-25, I have Anthony Davis of the Dallas Mavericks. Starting off the countdown at number 10, I have the most recently announced and voted upon Defensive Player of the Year for the 24-25 NBA season. I have Evan Mobley of the Cleveland Cavaliers. In 71 games played, Mobley averaged 18.5 points, 9.3 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 0.9 steals, and 1.6 blocks on 2 turnovers. He shot 55.7% from the field, 37% from deep, and 72.5% from the free throw line as one of the best, if not the best, two-way player in the NBA. Of course, there is a guy that there are certainly a couple of guys in this list that have a case for that one there. As I mentioned, 71 games played, only 30.4 minutes. I mean, this guy, his per 36 is just as good as any power forward or any player in the league. Cleveland went 58 and 13 in the 71 games played, and I had him responsible for 19 wins. You can make a genuine case that he was absolutely the best player for the Cleveland Cavaliers this year, particularly with that individual award. Now, when you look at the fact he's voted the DPOY, when you look at the fact that he's, racking up this kind of contributions to a highly successful team, and you look at the fact that he's you would have to assume, going to make all defensive first team and at least all NBA second team. I mean, this is a guy who's had a really big season. I mean, he's had this coming for a couple of years now, but he's absolutely put it together. A sensational year for Evan Mobley. I mean, you can make a case here. Just a few points I've got. Realistically, the next guy on my list is a guy that I have as the number one player for Cleveland. But, second best player on the second best team in basketball. That's a hell of a compliment there. Continues to step up on both sides of the ball. Proves that he can be a leader. And that comes with the fact that, he can lead a second unit. He can be the leader of the first unit. He's able to make contributions on both sides of the ball and have an impact. It's just been huge. Again, when you look across the league, he does have a case as the best two-way player in the NBA. And I think when you look at where he's sitting in this MVP list and where he sat for the season, it makes a lot of sense to have that kind of conversation. Again, genuine DPOY candidacy, and all with extremely limited minutes. So you can imagine if this guy was playing on a per 36-minute basis, exactly what it would do for this team. Probably helps the case for Kenny Atkinson as well. You're managing your players really, really well to get these kind of results. And overall, when you look at Cleveland, without him in the 11 games that he missed, they went 6-5, which might be a little asterisk against him. But for number 10 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season, I had Evan Mobley of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Moving on to number 8, and this was a real line ball for me. Ultimately, it came down to wins contributed to, which it ultimately does. But with another standout season on one of the best teams in basketball, and certainly the best team in the East. Number 9, Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Mitchell with another big season continues to prove that he's one of the best little guys in the league. Again, we're talking about a guy here who's only 6'1". 24 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game over the 71 games played. Had 1.3 steals and 0.2 blocks, along with 2.1 turnovers. So ball in hand, reasonably efficient there. Shooting, certainly to be desired, but again, we're talking about a genuine little guy here. 44.3% from the field, 30.8 from deep, and 82.3 from the free throw line. So as a shooter, he is still getting it done. I mentioned the 71 games played, 31.4 minutes. So again, genuinely good 36-minute averages there. Your 100 possession averages, all of that sort of stuff. Donovan Mitchell ticks a lot of boxes. And again, it comes down to the fact that Kenny Atkinson is that good of a coach. He's able to manage his players and the minutes really, really well. You add the rest of that there. 55-16 record with Donovan Mitchell, and I had him responsible for 20 of those 55 wins. Again, for me, best player on the best team in the East, and the second best team in the league. Like, that's a massive contribution and a huge feather in the cap. Mitchell's been able to do this for quite some time. Spoken about his ability to score when he was in Utah. Spoken about his ability to score as a Cleveland Cavalier. And he's just led them and shown that he, once again, proved that he's a genuine number one option on a good team. You can be a contender with Donovan Mitchell as your number one man. Now, you have to put a few pieces around him, but there's not many all-time greats that have won with nothing. There's a reason they're genuine all-time greats. He led Cleveland to their best non-LeBron season of all time. Of course, LeBron leading Cleveland to back-to-back 60-plus win seasons there in the late 2000s, but certainly the best non-LeBron team that Cleveland's ever put out on the floor. You would have to believe now people are starting to understand and buy into the fact that Donovan Mitchell has been the catalyst for this team. I talked about it all throughout the year. Cleveland were a team that everyone wanted to bust up, that no one believed in and thought they were useless. They brought into the system, they had their own self-belief, and now you're talking about the number one seed in the East, and a genuine NBA Finals could be on the cards for the Cavaliers. Probably the big asterisk, though, and this speaks to the depth of Cleveland. In the 11 games missed, Cleveland actually went 9-2. So if you want to look at it from a win-loss value when they're not there, you can make a case for Evan Mobley, but I just think Mitchell led them to more wins. So coming in at number 9 on my MVP list for the 24-25 NBA season, I have Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers. At number 8, this was a real line ball again. You know, genuine tough conversations to be had from 10 through 7. Number 6 sort of standing out, and then the top 5 had their own defined standout seasons. But yeah, the bottom half of my MVP list was very, very tough to decide. But at number 8, I was able to settle on the greatest shooter in NBA history, Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors, at number 8 in my MVP list for the 24-25 NBA season. Steph had a really nice start to the year. Buddy Hield had a really nice start to the year as well. Essentially did nothing after that, and I had him ranking a little higher than most people through the first 2.5 weeks of the season. But again, it's why the season runs for 25-26 weeks, and that's why you play 82 games. Steph was able to find his feet eventually, really get on a bit of a tear. Everyone talks about the fact that Jimmy Butler came in, changed things up, and Draymond Green was a DPOY candidate. Well, that's very true, but the catalyst to all of that is the man on screen there. 70 games played, and Steph averaged 24.5 points, 4.4 rebounds, and 6 assists to go with 1 steal and 0.4 blocks. 2.9 turnovers, so he was a little costly when he had the ball in hand. 44.8% from the field. Again, a little bit costly just in his general field shooting, but still the most lethal shooter the game's ever seen. 39.7% from deep, so a tick under 40 there, and over 90% from the free throw line. 32.2 minutes per game for the Warriors this year. 41-29 record with Steph as the leader, and I had him responsible for 21 wins there. So a nice season, but Steph Curry, considering the faltering the Warriors had, he still managed to come out ahead of someone like a Donovan Mitchell, with Cleveland setting, close to a franchise record in wins. Some points there for Steph on the season. He still remains the hottest hand in basketball, regardless of totals and percentages, right? You look at everyone shooting a basketball right now, you can't tell me there's anyone else you would pick other than Steph Curry, and that probably goes down to an all-time scale as well. He's still receiving a little credit compared to other years due to the other drama on the team. Again, the Jimmy Butler trade, the Draymond Green performances, the way he carries on, all of the other things there, but still remains the leader and the conscience of that franchise. If there is a criticism, it could be that his cold hand has meant the Warriors can be frozen at times. I mean, his scale of performance can really, really vary. That might be the only criticism there. He does have a single-digit game, but he can likely turn that around with a 50-pointer the next night. That's just the scale of performance. Experience and timing in the postseason could see a little more success, and we're seeing that against Houston right now, which could really elevate the team, particularly Curry as well. But in the games missed, in the 12 games missed, the Warriors went 7-5. So at number 8 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season, I have Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors. At number 7, again, we're talking about a line ball sort of decisions here. When you look between 10 and 7, we're talking about, 3 wins separating all of these players here, 4 wins separating all of these players. But a guy who as well had a slow start, but really proved to be vindicated as the season went on, And absolutely no apologies for that either. And that was Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves coming in at number 7 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season. Statistically, Ant actually had a better year than last year, I feel. 27.6 points, 5.7 rebounds, 4.5 assists, to go 1.2 steals and 0.6 blocks on 3.2 turnovers. Now, of course, when you look at the other side of that, I would say Ant wasn't a better defender this year. Statistically, on the offensive end, though, you can argue that he did produce more, considering even the 44.7 from the field wasn't great, but 39.5 from deep, the most three-pointers made. Ant had his moments there where he became probably a little too trigger-happy from the perimeter, but he also ended up going, into one of those modes there where you then had to chase him out. He was going to blow by you as a defender and start attacking the rim. 83.7% from the free throw line as well. Durable is one way to put it. 79 games played. As I go through my list there, no player played more games out of my candidates than Anthony Edwards. As I mentioned, 79 of 82 there. 36.3 minutes as well. 48 and 31 record in games played, and I had him responsible for 22 wins on the season. A few points for Anthony Edwards as well. As I mentioned, a slow start to the season. Had a huge 18 months prior. We saw exactly what he was doing with Team USA when he really stepped up in the absence of Karl-Anthony Towns and making the Minnesota franchise his as of last season. He took some time to adjust, managed to find his spot and thrived despite a change in his play style. Again, as I mentioned, becoming a little bit trigger happy from outside. You've also got to remember he had to make that adjustment because you lose Karl-Anthony Towns, you enter in Julius Randle, and Randle's a different style of player. So you also need to factor that in as well. So he was able to get around that eventually, really adapt, incorporated everyone around him, and had a really nice year. Your best ability ultimately is availability, and he seems to pride himself on that. It's rare that you'll see Ant just dog a game. He's always out there where he needs to be. And he still remains one of the best shooting guards in the league. The issue is there's such a gap right now to second place that it's not funny. And it's saying a lot because he's one of the most talented players in the league. When you look at what Minnesota did in games he wasn't there, they went 1-2, only a 3-game sample. So at number 7 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season, I have Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Moving on to number 6, and it's quite ironic that the man I had at number 7 was a former teammate of number 6, but he had an absolute breakout year, the best year of his career. Not a bad time to have it either. Traded away, but proven that he could step up. At number 6, I have Karl-Anthony Towns of the New York Knicks. Now, Jalen Brunson, his teammate, was voted the most clutch player in the NBA for that award and what it's worth. And there's no doubt about it that he is a genuine barometer of the New York Knicks. There's no doubt about it. The fortunes favour the brave, essentially, for what happens with this team and exactly how things go. But there's no doubt about it. The reason for the success, despite all of that from Brunson, for me, was Karl-Anthony Towns. Huge year for him. 72 games played. 24.4 points, 12.8 rebounds, 3.1 assists, to go with a steal and 0.7 blocks on 2.7 turnovers. Starting to back up his claim a little bit more as one of, if not the best shooting big, certainly in recent NBA history. I wouldn't say all time. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But 52.6 from the field, 42% from deep, and 82.9 from the free throw line. As reliable a big man with the ball in his hands, shooting the basketball, that is. 35 minutes a game, so that high minutes threshold under Tibbs really coming into effect there. 46 and 26 record for the Knicks when he played, and I have him listed there at 23 wins. So you look at just where all of this is stacking up for every single player. 23, 22, 21, 20, and 19 respectively in the bottom 5 of my top 10, and an honourable mention there with AD with 21. So that's the sort of season these guys will have. That's how hotly contested the league is right now. It's just how close the top 10 in the league is. However, I think your top 3 really start to branch out beyond that there. Some notes on Karl-Anthony Towns' season. Again, the breakout season he needed after a couple of down years with injury, trying to fit in as a number 1 and a number 2. Thought he was going to be a genuine number 2 for most of his career, but was able to step up with a genuine number 1 offensive season this year. For me, he was clearly the best player in New York, but the question now is how valuable can he be in the playoffs? That game does need to translate, and that's where Brunson's game works for him. It's crazy to think that he probably would be lauded for his offensive production and as the best center in the league if it wasn't for Jokic this year. That's the kind of season that Jokic has had. And the real question remains is if that minutes increase is going to be crucial and a major factor in his success moving forward in the playoffs. But in the games missed, they were 5-5, so an equal record there. But at number 6 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season, Karl-Anthony Towns of the New York Knicks. Entering into the top 5 now, and this is a guy that has taken a quantum leap in the eyes of many in the NBA, and certainly in this fan's eyes. I thought Cade Cunningham was going to be, another LaMelo Ball kind of player, and his efficiencies sometimes do lead that to be a little bit of a factor. But when you look at what he's been able to do in turning around this Detroit franchise this year, there's no doubt about it for me. Cade Cunningham, one of the 5 best players in the league, and that's why I've got him at number 5 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season. Cade Cunningham of the Detroit Pistons. Big year there by Cunningham. 26.1 points, 6.1 rebounds, 9.1 assists, around a 26-6-9 to go with a steal and 0.8 blocks on 4.4 turnovers. So again, it comes back down to where we speak of the efficiency there. It is a bit of a concern ball in hand on the turnovers, but on the other side of that, turnovers are a huge part of the game today with the amount of possessions and usage rate that players have. Reasonably efficient, though. I do have to give him credit for that. Just under 47% from the field for a guard. 47% really is where you start going to your upper echelon in efficiencies. 35.6% from deep, so you do have to respect him out there, and 84.6 from the free throw line. So if he doesn't make them, he's going to take them, and he's going to convert and punish you on that side of the ball. 70 games played, 35 minutes per game, 38-32 record when he played, and 25 of those wins he was personally responsible for, in my opinion. When you go and look at some of the factors with Cade this year, he helped lead the 6th greatest single-season turnaround in league history. I mean, Detroit last year looked like one of, if not the worst teams to ever play in the NBA. And this year they had a genuine case, and it looked like they were going to be cracking the top 4 at some points this year in the East. That's a crazy turnaround. Like, if you want to look in modern times, that's, looking at what Steve Nash did in Phoenix, and if you're going to take it into the NBA, into the three-point line era, that's Larry Bird with the Boston Celtics sort of turnarounds there, as far as players going to teams having an impact. That's huge. That's MVP level stuff. You've also got the Celtics of 08, but I mean, that's the sort of turnaround you're talking about there. He helped lift Detroit, as I mentioned, from arguably the worst team ever to an emerging contender. Turnovers, as I've said, still a concern, but he has stated his case for me as the best point guard in the NBA. And that's a big, big statement to make, but that's a huge year, and when you look at what's happened, it's been huge. Where can he take Detroit from here? They haven't been relevant for the last 18 years. They have just secured their first playoff win in 18 years, so that's a really, really big win for them, 17, 18 years. But where can Detroit go from here? Now they've reached that level, they've got to accelerate, and the Pistons overall went 6-6 in the 12 games he missed. But cracking my top 5 in the MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season, I have Cade Cunningham of the Detroit Pistons. Number 4, this is a guy who was, it was kind of interesting to see exactly where he was going to finish this season. Tailed off a little bit there, but in saying that, him tailing off in his production saw Boston grow as a team. Another 60-win season under his belt. You would think another All-NBA nod, first-team selection getting under his belt, another top 5 MVP finish getting under his belt as well. A massive season for the 4th place getter in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season, Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. A huge year, and if he was playing anywhere else and had a little bit more personality in the eyes of others, you can guarantee you that the conversation around this guy would just be completely different. 26.8 points, 8.7 rebounds and 6 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.5 blocks, less than 3 turnovers at 2.9, 45.2 from the field, so that has dipped a little bit, but he has also given an opportunity to shoot more deep ball this year, 34.3% from deep, 81.4 from the free throw line. So I think if he looks to get inside a little bit more, that's probably going to actually increase the spacing there for the Celtics to get more of those shots off. 72 games played, 36.4 minutes played in those games, a 53-19 record when he played the game, which is unbelievable there. And I had him responsible for 29 wins, so a reasonable step up there from Cade Cunningham. And when you look at what the Celtics did, yeah, you can really argue that, they had a pretty good record without him. You go and look at the win-loss column there for the Celtics. They had a pretty good record without him. They also have still one of, if not the deepest team in the league, which is something that people need to be cognizant about. A few points for Jason Tatum. He, to me, remains the best perimeter-based forward in the NBA. I know he's listed as a power forward. Let's be honest. Jason Tatum's game style is that of a small forward in comparison. So for me, he remains the best perimeter-based forward in the NBA. He again proved to be the best player on one of the best teams in basketball. He's been doing this now for the better part of 4 or 5 seasons. Again, it comes down to marketing. It comes down to people's perception of his personality. That's all people are worried about. When you actually look at the way the game's played and the way he unfolds things, there's no doubt about it. Tatum remains one of the leading players in the league. He still remained a capable and willing defender, but certainly not where we would have thought he would have been. But again, still remains one of the best players in basketball. No one's really going to say it, but you've got to really consider the fact that he's probably on the best run for a Celtic since Larry Bird, and that includes Paul Pierce. That's the kind of level I think he's playing at. He moved more perimeter. Can it be sustained? I just touched on that previously. I think he needs to get inside more. And as we mentioned with that record, Celtics going 8-2 in the 10 games he missed speaks to their depth. But at number 4 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season, I have Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. Onto the podium we go. Number 3 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season. One of the most dominant power forwards of the 21st century. In fact, you could make a very good case. He very well could be the second most dominant power forward of the 21st century. And that's Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks at number 3 in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season. Another big year for Giannis, and if it wasn't for 2 gigantic years ahead of him, he'd be getting more credit for his work. 30.4 points, 11.9 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 0.9 steals and 1.2 blocks on 3.1 turnovers. And from an efficiency standpoint, 60.1% from the field. Giannis becoming just the second player ever to average 30 on 60%, behind himself, who did it last year. 22.2% from deep, so that's not ideal. 61.7% from the free throw line. We know of the struggles he's had from the charity stripe there. He barely scrapes in, which is another thing that certainly raises questions, but speaks volumes of how well he played. 67 games played, 34.2 minutes played in those games. The Bucks went 40-27, and he had 32 of those wins to his name, in my opinion. It's ridiculous. Imagine if he'd have played another 10 games. I mean, we're looking at at least another 6 wins potentially. So a 6-3, 6-3 or 7-3 record could have been 47-30. That's a big season for a guy who's playing that much and delivering such there. Again, second season ever of 30 points per game on 60% shooting. The only other guy to do that was him. He did it last season. That's the kind of production we're seeing out of Giannis. He seriously looked like a chance to secure the scoring title for a lot of the year. The tough part about all of that, though, is the guy who did win the scoring title is a little bit further on my list. The top 3 guys I do believe in my list here were the 3 best scorers in the league this year. Not in order, of course. Which would then put him in a very elite class of guys to win a Defensive Player of the Year, scoring title, an MVP, and a Finals MVP. He'd be second on that list. The guy wearing 23 for the Bulls did it first. Much like Jason Tatum, remains a capable and willing defender, but certainly not to previous levels, certainly not to his DPOY levels. I wouldn't be shocked if he makes an all-defensive team, because you've got to factor in what he does defensively while carrying such a huge offensive load. Can you imagine if he was healthy and consistent? If he was healthy and had a healthy and consistent team around him, we're looking at a completely different argument when you look at what Lillard and Portis went through, and ultimately the Bucks went 8-7 in the 15 games that he missed. But third in my MVP race for the 24-25 NBA season, Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. Second place in the MVP. This might shock a few people, but it shouldn't really. He's been sitting second all year. I think he probably has been one of, if not the most productive centre of my lifetime, and that includes Shaquille O'Neal. He has just been an absolute sensation. He did it once again this year. In fact, you can make a case he had the most productive and efficient offensive season in league history. and yet I have him second in my MVP race. Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. Averaged a triple-double, 29.6 points, 12.7 rebounds, 10.2 assists. A rounded 30, 13, and 10 at centre. 1.8 steals, 0.6 blocks. He finished top 3, I believe it was, or top 5 in points, rebounds, assists, and steals per game. He's the only player to ever do it. No player's ever finished top 3 in points, rebounds, and assists, and I believe he finished second in steals. That's the kind of season that he had. A huge year. Like, statistically, an unforeseen year. He may win the MVP through the media. The only thing that hurts him this year is I don't think he was as productive as he was in previous seasons, but still hugely productive. In the sense of wins contributed too, but again, that's where you're factoring in team record. Just crazy what he was able to do. 3.3 turnovers amongst all of that with the ball in hand is crazy. 57.6 from the field and 41.7 from deep and 80% from the free throw line. A juggernaut is the only way to describe it. Just ridiculous work from Nikola Jokic. 70 games played, 36.7 minutes in those games, 46 and 24 record, and I had him 39 of 46 wins. It's just ridiculous the levels that he was at this year. If you want to go it based on games and wins responsible for, he's got a case. A very good case. I mean, this year, as I mentioned, the most efficient offensive season in basketball history, arguably. He continues to make the game look like a joke, and it's just the ease that he plays at. That's not even an insult. It's just the fact that he's so good, calm, and collected at what he does. I mean, what else? What else is there really? Defensively, second in steals per game. He's led centres across the league in deflections for the last 6 seasons. He was top 3 in deflections again this year. He's net neutral as far as defensive impact because of what he does on the offensive end and what his positives and negatives outweigh. So, you're not going to lose games defensively anymore with Nikola Jokic being in your lineup. If you could get some consistent help, he'd probably have another MVP and title. Hasn't played ever with an all-star over his 10-year career. Again, talked about his defence there, and the team itself went 4-8 in the 12 games that he missed. But he didn't quite finish at number 1 for me. I have him at number 2 in my MVP race with a 24-25 NBA season. The Joker, Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. And for me, the winner of the MVP, my number 1 getter, vote getter, the winner of the 24-25 NBA season, Shai Hilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. SGA, it speaks for itself. 32.7 points, he won a scoring title. 5 rebounds, 6.4 assists, to go with 1.7 steals and 1 block a game. Getting it done on both ends of the floor, efficiently and effectively. 51.9 from the field, 37.5 from deep, 89.8 from the free throw line. This is a guy who genuinely could be averaging around at 33, 5 and 6, 2 and 1 on 50, 40, 90. Yes, we are talking Michael Jordan levels. But more efficient from deep and more efficient from the free throw line, which is ridiculous to think of. Just crazy stuff for what's going on in the timeline of events here in the NBA right now. He played 76 games, so he's as available as any superstar in the league. 34.2 minutes, 63 and 13 record when he played for 47 wins. I had him responsible for 47 wins. To give you an idea, that's 8 clear. 8 clear of Nikola Jokic, who was 10 clear of Jason Tatum, 7 clear of Giannis. Your top 3 and top 2 in this league right now are so far and away above everyone else, it's not funny. Now, if you want to look at percentage of wins credited for, you'd go Nikola Jokic. But then I also want to point out that in 6 games missed, albeit a small sample size, the Thunder were 1-5 without Shai. That's a really terrible record. Delivered a season as a leader at both ends of the floor that hasn't been seen, you could argue, for decades. From a guard standpoint, I mean, plenty of bigs that have done it, but from a guard standpoint, you can genuinely argue that you haven't seen anything like this on both sides of the floor for almost, 20 years. You could argue Kobe in 2003 is the last time we saw something of this effect. He's as efficient a scorer in the NBA on the perimeter since prime Kevin Durant. That's a huge compliment there. Can score effectively from the floor, effectively from deep, effectively from the line. I saw a stat the other day that even after being called a free throw merchant, if you'd have taken all his free throws away, he's still one of the top 2 scorers in the league. It's ridiculous. He led the Thunder to that 68-14 record. Their net rating's the greatest now in history, beating the 72 Lakers. They could have genuinely been a 70-win team. So he led them to one of the 7 best records the league's ever seen, and he's an example of why watching the league is crucial, because if you followed the timeline of Shea, this shouldn't be a shock. And that's why I think he'll be the MVP of the 24-25 NBA season, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. We move on now to our other awards, and we'll try and be brief, a little bit of detail where we can be, but we move into our other awards. First one there I'm going to talk about is the Coach of the Year. And if you are the leader of the 6th greatest turnaround in league history, I think you have to have some sort of statement, particularly when you look at the recruiting of the Pistons, when you look at the change-up of the Pistons. I think JB Bickerstaff has to be the Coach of the Year. Now, everyone's going to look at the record, go, 44-38. Well, it's not really impressive. Again, I just spoke about it. 6th greatest turnaround in league history. This team went 14-68 last season. The complete opposite of what the Oklahoma City Thunder have done this year. Like, you don't do that because all of a sudden you get a huge roster. Sometimes it's a case. But there are only a couple of real adjustments in the sense of added in a few veterans. Ultimately, though, when you want to look at it, you've just had a guy who's really managed to get the best out of his players and really effectively use those veterans as well. Really great year for JB Bickerstaff. Really solid year for Detroit. Managed to make them relevant again after 18 years. They've managed to secure their first playoff win in 17-18 years. That's a huge tick in the box. Now, Kenny Atkinson, really should get some consideration for the minute management he's had of his stars and the results that he's been able to get. Dagnall, obviously, coaching one of the 7 best records in league history. That has to be a consideration as well. But when you look at those 2 rosters, in comparison to what you're seeing right now with Detroit, there's no way that anyone should have had a 30-game swing and had one of the biggest recoveries in league history. Just shouldn't have. It just doesn't make any sense. To me, JB Bickerstaff has to be the Coach of the Year. He would get my vote, no doubt about that. Moving on to the Rookie of the Year. Now, my Rookie of the Year was a tough one. It looked like it was going to be Jared McCain. He was playing some really good basketball. Looked like he was starting to saddle up for it. My early season of Reed Shepherd, well, that was flatter than an A4 piece of paper. And Zach Edey was really picking up there in spurts. But for me, in the end, it had to be Stephen Castle of the San Antonio Spurs. Now, this shouldn't shock anyone, but based on how Stephen Castle was playing on that San Antonio team, wasn't really conducive to the success that they needed. You've got Chris Paul, you've got Victor Wembanyama when you start the season. Rook, we don't need you running around trying to do everything. But it actually held him luckily in good stead, because when Wembanyama goes out, the trade for Fox happens, inconsistencies with Johnson and Vassell and all of that. He was able to step up and step out, and he played really nice throughout the season. His game certainly grew on me. And again, I think the Spurs have unveiled another good one if they're able to get things working for them in the future. Nice season as a rookie, 14.7 points, 3.7 rebounds, 4.1 assists per game. I mean, 15-4-4 as a rookie is a nice start. That's a really good base to build upon. I mean, there's a guy that can build to 20, 25 points per game if he really needs to. Also remembering he's playing with Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox. So really nice work there. 0.9 steals, 0.3 blocks on 2.2 turnovers. You don't see great efficiencies from a rookie, or rare that you do see great efficiencies from a rookie. So 42.8 from the field, 28.5 from deep, and 72.4 from the free throw line as expected. As I mentioned, stepped up in many games after Victor Wembanyama went down with his deep vein thrombosis diagnosis. We do hope he's back soon. You've also got to factor in, this is a rookie that came in under Coach Popovich. And then Pop went out with, some medical stuff that he may never recover from properly. Showed evident growth in his game from start to finish of the season, which is a really big key for me. And he led all eligible rookies, i.e. 65 games played. Actually led them in scoring. So that's a really nice tick in the box for Stephen Castle, who for me was the NBA Rookie of the Year for 24-25. I'll preface my next selection on the fact that, yes, there is probably a little bit of bias, whether it was upfront, honest, or inherent or otherwise. But my most improved player for the season was Dyson Daniels. of the Atlanta Hawks. Now, I know that comes from a trade, and I know that comes from more increased minutes, but generally speaking, that's what you will see. Obviously, there was a man in my MVP conversation that probably had a genuine case for that too. In Cade Cunningham, I would have to think that he would be at number 2. And there was another Atlanta Hawks teammate at one stage that certainly had a case as well when you look at things, particularly for Jalen Johnson. But for me, Dyson Daniels' impact across the floor for, well, pretty much everybody just proved to be hugely crucial for the success of the Hawks. Daniels on the year, 14.1 points, 5.9 rebounds, 4.4 assists, so 14, 6, and 4. Leading the league in steals at 3 per game and deflections. Had a total of 433, something stupid. Shattered the record for deflections since the time they've been tracking it. 2.2 turnovers and effective with ball in hand, 49.3% from the field. 34% from deep. He'll look to grow on that there, and he'll certainly want to improve from the free throw line at 59.3%. But if you go and look at the reasons that I have Dyson Daniels as my most improved player, number 1, he improved all 5 major categories, both in his per game output and his per 36 minutes. So his points, rebounds, assists, steal, and blocks all increased across the board, both per game and per 36. You know, his role improved, but he also proved to be a genuine top 3 option on a team. Now, I know everyone looks at the points per game, but you've also got to understand exactly what he's bringing to the table defensively that allows for him to be that valuable second, third point. Because if he doesn't produce it offensively, he gets it done defensively and allows for other teammates to grow. And of course, you know, a known defender, a good key defensive rotation for the Pelicans, but he just took an absolute another level of elevation in his presence on the defensive side of the ball this year. And everyone's going to look at the offensive production as to why people get most improved. But, I mean, here's a guy who was runner-up Defensive Player of the Year now that he's got a starting role and getting it done offensively on a team next to Trae Young. You know, I think there has to be some factors there. Not everyone weighs into it, but I think when you look on both sides of the ball, as I tend to do, you know, from a most improved standpoint, I didn't think it was close. So my most improved player for the 24-25 NBA season would be Dyson Daniels of the Atlanta Hawks. Going into the last of our individual awards, we've got 2 more to go here. My 6th man of the year is the actual 6th man of the year, keeping in mind that I'd done all of these prior to award announcements. But again, as I've outlined, sometimes time constraints are just a little too tough to be able to get stuff out in time. But my 6th man of the year, Peyton Pritchard of the Boston Celtics. Now, a lot of that does come down to his production off the bench. You know, he led all eligible bench scorers across the league in points per game, 14.3, 3.8, 14.3 points a game. To go with 3.8 rebounds and 3.5 assists, 0.9 steals and 0.2 blocks on 1 turnover a game. And efficiency as well, 47.2 from the field, 40.7 from deep, and 84.5 from the free throw line. I mean, we're talking about a guy here who could go to another team in a starting role. We're talking about a guy here that can be a genuine second, third option. I mean, if he really wanted to elevate his game, maybe he could do a Tyler Hero and be the number 1 option on the team. I don't know. But that's sort of the sacrifice you see from genuine 6-men. They're key rotations, but they do step up when they're required. So as well as leading all the eligible scorers across the league off the bench, you're looking at a guy here who proved to be a genuine leader and game winner despite his minimum role. So when he was able to step up and get into the starting lineup, when he was able to step up and be that number 1 option, he proved to be a game winner again. We're talking about Boston. We're talking about one of the deepest teams in the league. I get it and I understand it. And a part of that is being that production of what your team is. But to still be able to step up, step out and deliver, that's just huge. I mean, that just speaks volumes of the kind of player that he is, the kind of player he can be, and exactly what he's able to deliver. So, to me, no hesitation whatsoever with him being there and being that Rookie of the Year. That's not the Rookie of the Year, the 6th man of the year. That's the kind of presence he brings. He'll be key in the playoffs. He adds a lot of depth to the Celtics. Some people sort of underrate them there. I think they're a genuine 9-man rotation, and considering you can put Peyton Pritchard in any of those lineups and be a leading scorer and hugely efficient as that scorer, you know, it speaks volumes to the kind of player he is. So my 6th man of the year, the 24-25 NBA season, Peyton Pritchard of the Boston Celtics. And my final individual award, again, I don't do clutch player of the year. I think it's, it doesn't factor in everything. It just looks at shots made essentially and how you look down the stretch with delivering offensively. There's a lot to do defensively there as well, because while you might score, multiple baskets down the other end, if you're just letting the opposition get away with murder and you're losing games in that clutch situation, doesn't necessarily make you the most reliable. For me, my defensive player of the year would have been Dyson Daniels, and personally, I don't think it would have been close. Now, he ended up being the runner-up defensive player of the year. For me, I would have voted him number one. It was a pretty tight race. I'm not losing sleep over Evan Mobley. Here's a guy that probably could have won it twice in his career now, Evan Mobley. So we're not talking like a robbery. I'd be really shocked if it was a robbery. But he's been playing really, really well. But Dyson Daniels, again, a huge year. Led the league in steals at 3 a game. The best season for steals that we've seen pretty much since Gary Payton in 1996. He won the Defensive Player of the Year. He also led the league in stocks, so combined steals and blocks. He's the first guard to do that since 1987-88 when Michael Jordan won the Defensive Player of the Year. That's the level of defensive production we were seeing out of Dyson Daniels. Now, Jordan was a far better shot blocker, and the way that he played and got steals back in that season, again, it's not even close. You've got a guy averaging 35 while doing that. Dyson Daniels averaging 14. So the energy levels, the different levels of play there, you've got to really factor in. As I mentioned there, first guard to lead the league in stocks since 87-88. The best steals season since Gary Payton in 95-96. Again, started to step up as one of the best two-way guards in the league when you factor in the efficiency of his offensive game. He's one of the few people as well where those numbers actually match the film. So what he was doing on the floor actually matched what you were able to see with your eyes. There's a lot of guys, his statistics matched up what you saw with your own eyes, because there's quite a number of players that rack up some numbers and then you go and look on the footage and you go, you don't really rate that. But just to give you an idea of some of the numbers that Daniels put up defensively, really should just let people know what you saw on film was absolutely correct. To give you an idea, Dyson Daniels led the league in steals. This is per game, by the way. Led him in steals, led deflections, and these are totals that he got as well. Number one in steal percentage across the league. He was actually fourth in total miles per game and feet per game covered on the floor, and he was top 3 in defensive miles covered. So you weren't just watching a guy running around getting steals. If you go and watch him in a one-on-one situation, he covered the floor, he pushed over and under screens, he got to his man. For me, that's why Dyson Daniels would have been my Defensive Player of the Year for the 24-25 NBA season. To round out the video, we'll try and do a little bit of a blitz through here. I also have some selections for the All-Rookie teams, the All-Defensive teams, and the All-NBA teams. Now, keeping in mind that we no longer really have to pick them based on position, it's pretty much positionless, which is really, really interesting. Of course, I've had my own theories on that, because what happens if your 5 best players for any given rookie class or defensive season, we're all centers or we're all guards or even all NBA, same sort of thing, sort of makes things really interesting. But nonetheless, that's how the NBA wishes to do it. We'll start my All-NBA second team, and I'll quickly just run through the names here. So the All-Rookie second team for me in the 24-25 NBA season, Zach Edey of the Memphis Grizzlies started out really nicely on a team that had a little bit of success early. Of course, got rid of their coach and certainly didn't perform to the expectations I think they had early on in their season. I had Dalton Connect of the Los Angeles Lakers, managed to get his own time here or there amongst a really stacked Laker team. Much like the Austin Reeves mold, a guy that they managed to just pull out and was able to really get something going. Tristan Da Silva had his moments in Orlando. Again, another team that's been upwards and downwards on exactly what's happening with their season. Managed to break 500 and, of course, make the playoffs. I would expect him to have a bigger contribution next year. Yves Missy for the New Orleans Pelicans, a really nice young defender on a team that, again, just wasn't able to build any consistency. And he's in a rock and a hard place. Don't be shocked if you don't see him hanging around too long down there. And Kyle Filipowski, another guy in a terrible situation in Utah, but was able to provide a couple of moments there, a couple of leading moments, able to get some shots up, able to show what he could do as well. But that was my all-rookie second team for 24-25. Moving on to the rookie first team, and there'll be some discussion around this one, there's no doubt about it. But I feel these guys were clearly the 5 best players of the rookie class. Now, obviously keeping in mind, a number of players that weren't on this list, particularly someone like a Reed Shepherd, who was one of the leading draft picks, that just didn't have a good season, and someone like McCain, who looked like he was going to be the Rookie of the Year and then gets injured. Of course, my Rookie of the Year, Stephen Castle, already spoken about him in this video. He would be my Rookie of the Year in the way he was able to produce for the Spurs with everything going on. Jalen Wells was able to step up. He had a couple of really nice bright moments as well. Sort of similar vein when you look at someone like a Tristan Da Silva and a Filipowski, someone who was able to, show their own stuff, albeit a bit of a deeper team. But he had a really nice year as well. Good rookie campaign. Moving over to Zachariah Richelet for Atlanta, another guy who was able to step up and step out, became a really nice addition there for the Hawks. Of course, they had multiple things going on for them. I think they've got one of the All-NBA players on their team if he gets selected. They had 2 candidates for Most Improved. They had 1 candidate for the Defensive Player of the Year. A couple of trade things going on that allowed a little bit more space for his game. But a really nice season there for Richelet. My last 2 there, Bub Carrington and Alexander Sarr. Sarr, of course, the former NBL player, and he really started to step up in the second half of the season. Carrington had a couple of nice games there and wins for Washington, proving that he can be a bit of a pillar moving forward. Not probably a championship contender, but certainly a pillar to get them back developing and see how he goes under some of the veterans now on that team. When you're looking at a Marcus Smart and a Chris Middleton, factoring as well Jordan Poole having been on a championship team as well. And Carrington's one of those guys. Sarr also had a couple of those games, was arguably the best defender in that rookie class as well. So that is my all-rookie first team. Plenty of upside in all of those guys. You do have to think that would look a little bit different if it wasn't for injuries and unfortunate circumstances for other players. But a nice rookie first team class for 24-25. Moving on to the all-defensive selections. Now, for me, I think these teams all but pretty much penciled themselves in. There were a couple of debates I had for a couple of players, particularly from the second team standpoint, but I was pretty comfy in the end with my selections there. In the centre, and this would just be from my own sort of picks here, I sort of go a little bit more traditional with the defensive player side of things, because that's a little bit different. Trying to actually work things out defensively is a little different because there are so many factors that go into it. I had, because I ultimately has picked a centre, 2 forwards and 2 guards, with the way everything is done. For my centre, I had Miles Turner of the Indiana Pacers, averaged 2 blocks a game and was absolutely crucial in the success of the Pacers this year. Now, there were plenty of contributing factors, and you'll see that in my All-NBA third team. But I just thought that Miles Turner was huge, continues to play a crucial role. He's not the traditional two-way centre that we've seen in the past, but he's a tremendous shot blocker, really clogs up the lane, tends to play against some of the better bigs in the league, and he certainly has that ability to stretch the floor defensively as well. So I had him. Draymond Green was a top 3 contender for the Defensive Player of the Year. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think he had another good season. He's been the crucial catalyst for close to a decade now for the Golden State Warriors. Him and Andrew Bogut, and he learned a lot of Andrew Bogut as to how to play his defense there. Genuine point forward, a guy that they can run the offense through, get him touches and whatnot, and he's certainly able to communicate a lot defensively. I don't necessarily think he's the all-time generational defender that people put him at, and I certainly wouldn't have had him in my top 3 Defensive Player of the Year award, but certainly another good season, and certainly recognition deserved for the second team. Moving on there, Shai Hilgeous-Alexander, there is no real explanation needed for me. The one thing I factor in here with Shai's selection is he does all that level of defensive production and isn't any slouch defensively while putting all those numbers up offensively. So there's a lot of energy that has to go into it. Jaden McDaniels, another selection there for the Minnesota Timberwolves, continues to be the leading defensive presence there in Minnesota and a real catalyst for that team, even with Rudy Gobert. I think right now McDaniels was a big reason for any success they had defensively, particularly with the way that he did have to step up when you look at what was going on the perimeter there and some of the off-on nights that they were having offensively. And finally, I had OG Anunoby of the New York Knicks. I nearly had Mikal Bridges once again, but Anunoby's just been an absolute monster defensively over the last few seasons. And while I think Bridges was covering more distance, I think the impact of Anunoby's minutes was far greater. So for me, that is my all-defensive second team, the 24-25 NBA season. Moving on to the all-defensive first team for 24-25. This one to me was an absolute layup for at least 4 of these guys, in my opinion there, of course. The actual defensive player of the year doesn't need any explanation. We've spoken about it already. That one there is Evan Mobley. Runner-up defensive player of the year. Again, for me, doesn't need any explanation. This is a guy who I had as my defensive player of the year. Dyson Daniels of the Atlanta Hawks. A couple of other guys here that I don't think really need any explanation. To me, still the best defensive center in the NBA. Probably the best ambidextrous player in the NBA. A guy that racked up steals and blocks like they were nothing all season. Getting it done. Was able to taper away a little bit in the end because of the performance of his team. But he's been the constant for them, and that's Jaren Jackson Jr. of the Memphis Grizzlies. Really nice season for him once again. And, you know, the talking heads, they just love to try and stir the pot a little bit here. Saw Kendrick Perkins the other day trying to criticise Jaren Jackson Jr. And the fact that he's not a top 10 big in the West, let alone the league. Well, I'd like to find anyone who is putting 20 points up and scoring efficiently like he does, all while playing some of the best defense for any big or any guard in the league. Whether it's, you know, stealing the ball, blocking shots, on-ball defense, off-ball defense, help defense, weak side defense. You know, to me, he's the most active big man defender in the league. I don't even think it's close. You know, there is another guy, obviously, that would be on this list. There'd be another guy who would also be in contender for this list. I think there's 2 guys that could have been had they been healthy. Obviously, Victor Wembanyama and the other being Chet Holmgren. But that wasn't the case. Like, let's be realistic here. That wasn't the case. That's not what happened. And just the dynamic that Jaren Jackson Jr. brings as a defender certainly gets forgot about because of all the other stuff that's gone on over the last couple of years in the revolution of the league. You got to remember, here's a guy who's a former defensive player of the year. The other 2 guys there, Armin Thompson was absolutely huge for the Houston Rockets in changing the way they play and the effectiveness of his defense there. Another guy whose numbers and performance back up the film. Just huge, just massive in the way that he played this year. A bit of bias there as well, being a Rockets fan. But yeah, just a tremendous season by Thompson, really setting the standard. And Lou Dort, another guy who finished top 5 in Defensive Player of the Year voting, has consistently been one of the best defenders in the league on the perimeter for a number of years now. Right now he's being overshadowed by Dyson Daniels, but another guy who very well could have a Defensive Player of the Year award in his back pocket. That's the level that he plays to, has consistently played to, and a big reason for OKC's success. But that's my all-defensive first team, the 24-25 NBA season. Strangely enough, the quickest ones that I'm going to be able to do are going to be my All-NBA teams, because I base my All-NBA teams off the same principles that I have for my MVP list, which is 65 games played, leading your team to wins, no trade talk there, and playoff hopes. Now, this is all based on the regular season, and, you know, there are a couple of little exceptions I do have in here to playoff hopes, because there are some guys who just have these huge seasons that you're going to see here, who have had a good success and great success, not necessarily their team, but deserve the recognition that they get. So, you know, when I look at things here for my All-NBA second team, I'm going to do it from wins to, least amount of wins to most amount of wins credited for. You should probably get the gist from there. So on this list, I have Jalen Green of the Houston Rockets, a guy who stepped up multiple times last year in the absence of Şengün. Did it multiple times again in the absence of Şengün this year. However, I think he actually took the mantle as probably Houston's number 1 option, which is something you don't see very often. I had him credited for 18 wins. The next lot of guys that I had, the next guy I have coming up also credited for 18 wins, and probably someone overshadowed because of the improvements of Jalen Johnson, the evident improvement of a Dyson Daniels, and you add in the fact that you had the trades of Hunter and Bogdanovic, you know, sort of gets overshadowed in the way he plays. But again, the guy who led the league in assists, Trae Young. He's a guy who's been 25 and 10 most of his career. That's crazy. Albeit inefficient, that's crazy. The guy is not afraid to have the ball in the big moments, and just continues to prove it. I had him at 18 wins. Another guy who got little to no credit, and that's because he was playing with Kevin Durant, the fire that is Phoenix and has been for most of his career. I had Devin Booker, and I had him at 19 wins. I think he may be the only untouchable once again for that Phoenix team. Now, a decade in, do you get rid of your franchise's all-time leading scorer? I don't know. But here's a guy who was there in the bad times, who was the number one option in the good times, was the best player in their only finals appearance in nearly 50 years, and still nothing going on. He willingly takes a back seat. He willingly gets around the floor when he needs to, whether that's on the offensive end as the primary scorer or the facilitator. There's just something you really have to take into account for me with Devin Booker. And then I had the leaders of the Indiana Pacers at 19 wins each, Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton, two guys that just stepped up after slow starts and managed to keep getting the job done, sneaking the Pacers into that top four of the East to be competitive. A vote come out that Tyrese Halliburton's the most overrated player in the NBA. I don't know whether that's just a slight. I still think he's reasonably effective as a point guard, and Siakam continues to have those all-star level seasons that no one talks about. So for me, that was the All-NBA third team, the 24-25 NBA season. We've gone through these guys here. You're not going to be shocked, but the bottom 5 of my top 10 in the MVP race is my All-NBA second team. Now, one thing you'll notice with my previous team, with the All-NBA third team, is that it is all based around, positionless basketball, but I also base it around the fact that, hey, it's also all to do with number of wins contributed to. Now, my MVP race makes this a little bit more interesting, but you do have to be eligible for 65 games played. That's ultimately the catalyst for it. Otherwise, Anthony Davis is going to get a nod. Victor Wembanyama would be very, very close. Franz Wagner would be very, very close. That's the kind of level we're talking about here, and production-wise. But really easy for my All-NBA second team. It's my 10 through 6 in my MVP race. So at number 10, I had the Defensive Player of the Year in Evan Mobley. At number 9, I had Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers, the number 1 option for that Cavs team. Number 8, I had Steph Curry, the leader of the Golden State Warriors. At number 7, and Anthony Edwards, the second best shooting guard in the NBA. And this season, at number 6, I had the the second best centre in the league in Karl-Anthony Towns, and they are the players that make up my All-NBA second team. Pretty formidable team when you want to put things out there. If you want to play a genuine small ball lineup, you've got Mitchell at the 1, Steph at the 2, Ant at the 3, Cat at the 5, and Mobley at the 4. That's a pretty formidable small ball lineup. I'd be pretty comfy with this team playing small ball against pretty much any unit in the league this year. That's the level of production they were able to produce. But that was my All-NBA second team for the 24-25 NBA season. And the All-NBA first team, no shock, the top 5 of my MVP race. And I would genuinely say that this team is the most unbeatable team in the league. To me, you have the best point guard, the best shooting guard, the best 2 forwards, and the best center in the league on the one side. It's not even close. About the only other guy that would have really potentially cracked this, which would have been very interesting as to how I would have done it, because Victor Wembanyama would have been an honourable mention in my MVP race if he was healthy, and so would Anthony Davis. He would have been an honourable mention as well because of the trade. But if you're going to look at games played and wins credited to, the pace that Wembanyama was on probably would have put him on this team. And the pace that Anthony Davis was on probably would have made him a genuine contender for this team as well. Albeit they probably go down to the second team. But you're looking at 2 guys there that would have made the second team but wouldn't have made my MVP race. And that's a slight flaw in the system that I do have. It's why I'm considering changing the way that I rank players in order to really do that. But at the same time, it's very hard for me to say that they wouldn't have been in that conversation. It's very hard to say a guy that is like a Victor Wembanyama or is like Anthony Davis wouldn't have been deserving of that honour just because I don't have them in the MVP race. It's happened before. But a huge year for these 5 guys here. As I mentioned, the 5 best players in the NBA for me this year, my top 5 in the MVP race. At number 5, the best point guard in the league, Cade Cunningham of the Detroit Pistons. At number 4, the best perimeter-based forward in the league. He plays power forward. He's really, for me, a small forward. Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. At number 3, the best power forward in the league, Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks with the second ever 30 points on 60% season. At number 2, the best center in the league, the most efficient offensive season arguably in league history. When you look at the totality of points and assists, you're looking at Nikola Jokic there from the Denver Nuggets. And at number 1, one of the most effective 30-point seasons in league history, and per possession and per minute production in a long time. The MVP of the league for me, Hilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. That would be my All-NBA first team for the 24-25 NBA season. And that wraps it up. I'll have more production of podcasts and more production of videos as the playoffs go through. At the end of the first round, I'll look to get something out. I mean the completion of the first round. I'll do it as each round actually wraps up. It's just going to make it a bit easier than trying to chase series. But ultimately there, that summarises who I thought were the best players in the league, who I thought deserved each individual award, and who I thought should adorn each team to recognise the season that was 24-25. Let me know what you think. Who did you have winning your individual awards? What did your MVP count look like? Hey, who did you have on those all-rookie teams? Who do you think deserved an all-defensive nod? And ultimately, what did you think of the all-NBA selections as well? Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Anyway, guys, that's been me. I'm out.